Uh, not mine, from the Intro to Judaism class. Some of them are topics that I didn't cover, and some of them are topics I did. Okay, so let's do modern Jewish timeline. Okay. This is Cameron. This is her husband. Oh, okay. Well, because it depends on when you show up. He comes with her about maybe a quarter of the time. Yeah. So let me put it on I gotta do two things at once. But it's a good thing I had my chai this morning. I gotta put this on screen share for you all. And it's showing up. Okay, that's right. Whatever I put, this is what Ben told me today. Whatever here. Whatever I put on, you're watching me scroll through things. Okay. All right, cats and kitties. I want to go back a little bit in the film. I'm watching the clock. Go back a little bit in the film to the earlier stuff, but again, we got two history guys here. Anybody else? Just if you can't, all right, all of us. Anybody, just what do you remember from 10th grade history, 9th grade history about what was the Middle Ages like? And if you all say the plague and people killing each other, that's not going to be sufficient. What was this? What was the status of Jews? What were the status of the classes? What were some other features of the Middle Ages? We'll start with Mr.
I'll say that for one, they're incredibly poorly understood today, and they're very badly stereotyped. A study came out that in 1400, the average person in Denmark ate better in terms of nutrition and more calories than somebody in 2000.
That's interesting.
Huh.
Okay.
Well, you got to think about the beer. Well, I mean, their beer is not like our beer. Their beer is like drinking frothy bread.
Yeah. But go on. What I'm getting to is what changes? What is the big change that happens? How do we distinguish? We talked about this in the previous classes, the difference between biblical times and suddenly the temple's gone. What do we do? What do we do? And so what things are whatever you know about Jewish life or whatever you know about general life, what are features of the Middle Ages? Isabella is in that period. We're just on the edge. Yeah. I'll start. Okay. This is what you are. This is what God made you to be. This is where you're going to stay. You're rich, you're powerful, you're a pope, you're a ruler, and next underneath them might be, noblemen, the classes. They were very, very stratified. You can't change who you are. God made it that way. And so you can't go up or down. So then I'm not doing it in exactly the order. So, and today you could argue that today somewhat. But the uber rich were really in power. There was no democracy. Then there were guilds and working people. And then there were farmers and whatever. And below them were the serfs, or you could say below them were the Jews and then the serfs. But basically, the idea in the Middle Ages is you can't just get up and leave or move or be in another class. You can't go. You can make money. People did make money, but the rare individual was somebody who could be seen as a well-off individual. Go ahead. What else?
So correct me.
Please put the phones on silent. I did too. Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it was also this time that we started seeing the social outcasting of Jewish people based off that in that class system. So
Before that, even before that, yeah.
More specifically with
Oops, I'm going to change to a different.
rumors of various ritualistic type things like blood letting.
Yeah, the blood libel. Yeah.
And then
We definitely do that.
So what?
So we definitely do that.
Yeah. Okay.
so at that point, moved out.
Oh, that's what I was looking for. Okay, I grabbed the wrong slide. I'm listening to you, Cameron. Okay, so, instead of me, somebody read. And let's go turn off those two lights, and I think this light will be not that bad. It's, there is no agreed upon date. I can read it from my computer. Oh, yeah, well, oh, they're all off. Okay. Huh? No. You're closest. You would say you were worried about being in. Go ahead and read. Yeah.
There is no agreed upon date or place for the beginning of modern Jewish history. Modernity came to the Jews at different, oh, God. Oh, there we go. Jews at
What did I do?
in different places. Recently, historians in their periodization of Jewish history have come to refer to this gradual process as the early modern period.
Okay, so do another paragraph and then I'll interject. So we're not gonna, I mean, we're gonna cover various scholars and their positions on when do we become modern? Go ahead, one more.
Modern times will signify the appearance of certain new characteristics of individual and communal Jewish life. However, they have long debated which factors, specifically emancipation and liberalism, Zionism, mass migration, science, capitalism, population increase, improved intergroup relations, were determinative.
Okay, so I read some of these people and I started this not in college. I went to 1 year of college and then I went to Israel, and in the course I did in Israel, they covered a lot of this because obviously it was a program about Israel. So we did it. I was pretty bored, but I finally got it that you can't understand modern Israel and Zionism and nationalism until you look back and you see what happened in this period. So Sholem takes the earliest position. He's that same Gershom Sholem who wrote about mysticism. He says that the expulsion from Spain marks the beginning because, it was that then caused people to become schisms, right? Baruch Spinoza goes to Amsterdam and he questions Jewish law, and other people begin to question things. The Sabbateans, that's the Shabtai Tzvi guy who declared himself a false Messiah. I don't agree with that. But you're always going to have hints, like, did anybody see Oppenheimer? I mean, that movie really shows you what's going on in the 50s and this not just fear about the atomic bomb, but the realization that we could destroy everything. All right, so but Hasidism does come in. This is early modern, but it's not quite modern. The 18th century. The idea, the idea again, that the Rebbe suddenly is holier than a rabbi. And there were towns in Poland and Russia where there were big arguments between people who were following a Hasidic Rebbe and people who were following the normative rabbi. They would say, "Oh, your butcher isn't as kosher as our butcher." So there's just the idea that you could have arguments about Jewish law. That was a big thing. Okay, Jacob Katz. I'm not going to do it. Okay, but we're going to learn a new word today. Katz does agree about Hasidism. So the general enlightenment seems to be, go ahead and help me, that before the French Revolution and before the American Revolution, there's, science and people beginning to do experiments. And so they begin to maybe think, maybe there should be freedom for the individual, at least the rich people. But the idea that certain kinds of self-determination. So this begins to grow, and then we have a thing called the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment for the rest of the world included people should get an education. Again, not everybody, but so more social and economic change. So then this guy, Jonathan Israel, I didn't read him, argues that mercantilism, which says that the idea of the state, takes over certain things to make sure that everybody has what they need. There was also court Jews. They were you've heard of Montefiore? Moses Montefiore, different Moses, and you've heard of various rich Jews, right? They weren't that they were so fantastically rich, but they were generally brought into the court to come and talk on behalf of the Jews. Anyway, most scholars agree that around 1700 marks the beginning of the modern period. And this guy, Ben Zion Dinur, says that's when a particular Rabbi Judah led 1,000 Jews to Palestine. Oh my God. God didn't tell us to go back to Palestine, so how could he do it? So he says that's a modern idea. As I said before, Hasidism kind of is a beginning of this idea that of differences between Jews. So all we know is, it happens. So what is the Haskalah? All right, the Haskalah, let me find that slide. Let's just do this one. Okay. I'll do the screen share. So I don't have to do anything with that. So you guys looking at that, and I now have to go to the Zoom again. All right, where is it? Where's the Zoom? Hang on. Share screen, modern period 1. There it is. Okay, so they said in the last slide, it comes for us later. Well, why does it come for us later? Because we are somewhat, like oppressed. So everything else that's happening to everybody else, they're doing science and they're doing rationalism, they're studying things. And, so there are certain Jews, but they're not aware of that we were isolated. And by the way, you put it on your finger on it very well, Cameron. I don't think I made this clear in the middle. We didn't really get deeply into the Middle Ages. For the Jews in every place, but different in every place. In the Arab world, I think you guys remember we said they were second-class citizens, but it wasn't terrible. It was pretty terrible. But the term was dhimmi. It's not on the slide. So dhimmi was, you can't have a synagogue higher than a mosque. If a Muslim is riding in the street on a camel, you have to walk. Second class, Jim Crow. Think of Jim Crow. However, they were allowed to thrive, and they became. That's where my family came from, Turkey. So the heritage of the Arabic Jews never had quite the horrible things, except for the occasional Muslim uprising, like happened in Spain and Morocco. And that goes for all of the North Africa too. So think of everything south of the Mediterranean as tolerance, but second class. Think of north of it as, again, it was different from place to place. You guys remember that they were kicked out of England. They were kicked out of Germany. That was who gave that your talk on Russia. So, all right. So where did these crazy people fit? That was the big issue. I wonder if I can pull that out of the way. There I go. Okay. There we go. Now you're seeing that. Okay, let's do modernity brought new possibilities for contacts between Jews and their neighbors on both a personal and collective level. Social relationships between Jews and non-Jews became more common. Not really. This is what we see today is a result of that. So somebody want to read the intellectual history? Yeah, okay.
Aren't Jewish thought been fueled by the promise of emancipation?
Always been fueled. Oh, it's also been fueled, yeah.
The Haskalah.
Yeah.
The European-based movement of Jewish enlightenment emerged as an effort to revive those Jewish intellectual traditions that was compulsory to European culture. The academic study of Judaism.
I'll do this one. It's a term that was used that then evolved into what's now the conservative movement. They called it Wissenschaft des Judentums, the scientific study of Judaism. This is us studying us for the first time. You read the Bible, read the Torah, read the Talmud, but for the first time, there emerged in Germany Jews who said, hey, you know what? They did history of the Germans and this, let's write a history of Jews. So a guy named Gratz, you may have heard of him, wrote the first history of the Jews. Okay, he grew out of the Haskalah,
Explain Jewish religion.
examined.
Sorry, from examine Jewish religion from the perspectives of theology, literature, and history. It thus set the stage for future modern Jewish philosophers like Franz Rosenzweig,
Rosenzweig.
Mordechai Kaplan, and Abraham Joshua Hessel.
Now, these guys, Rosenzweig is 20th and 30s Germany. Kaplan is 20s and 30s America, and then 50s. And Joshua Heschel, Abraham Heschel, is 60s America. But saying if they hadn't had the earlier folks talking about what do we believe, how do we believe, how do we deal with these issues? So they asked questions, who are we? Okay. Modern Jews, go ahead. Whoops. Get out of there. Okay. Good.
Modern Jews moved and multiplied. At the end of the 18th century, the world Jewish population was approximately 2.5 million, the majority of whom lived in Eastern Europe or the Ottoman Empire. By the second half of the 20th century, the world Jewish community had been completely transformed, numbering 13 million, with the majority living in Israel and the United States. This remarkable growth during the modern period contributed to the urbanization of the Jews and the diversification of their economic activities. Previously relegated to commercial occupations, mostly petty trade, modern Jews took advantage of newly won access to education and opportunity to take on the new rules in business and professional world.
New roles. Yeah. Okay. So that's all the general stuff. Let me do now one more slide, from my own material on some of the timelines. And folks, read Tolushkin, read Where's the Guy? My Little Funny Guy here, Stan Mack. It's fun. It's a great comic book, and you can read it where you sit down. I don't say that word. Or you can lie down. You can read it and to your friends. Oh, look at the Inquisition, So anyway, I did that one already. Okay, I wanted to just do a quick timeline, and then I'll comment, and then we'll go to the film. So these are and I sent this to you. These are the things that we see. That share screen. Okay, now I got to do the share screen. But I'm getting to details, and then we'll watch the video somewhat. And somebody keep telling me the time. Is it 7:41? We're doing okay. Now, where's the Zoomy? Okay, share. I don't want to bore you. I want to excite you that we are still dealing with all of these issues. And when you get somebody today, when you go, let's say you went to a fundamentalist church and they say, what about Moses? What about, was there really a crossing of the Red Sea? What about this? They're still in the 19th century. Okay, so let's say roughly, okay, that's good. Let's say roughly 1700 to 1950. Why do I say 1950 instead of 1945? It took 5 years for people to get through the trauma so maybe it's 45. But remember, I've said before, World War II, the destruction of European Jewry, the realization that one of the most civilized nations on earth could do something like the Holocaust and the atomic bomb, and for the world was in shock. I mean, I was born in 53, and my parents talk about that period, and I don't want to get into that, but the 50s also brought us the Rosenberg case, where a couple was accused of being traitors, which made us think of the Dreyfus case in France. So there it is. The Jews are always getting accused of something. But anyway, what the modern period brings that we still are dealing with, Enlightenment, which is science and idea of people being able to have certain mobility, emancipation, meaning, like we say, the same, not quite the same as the Black experience, but the idea that Hey, you guys know that the first ghetto, again, going back to the Middle Ages, the first ghetto was established in what city? Anybody? Venice, 1516. You know, not Germany. They said, well, what are we going to do with these people? Okay, well, we're going to go a city with, or a walled in area, and they have to, and you've seen the Jewish star. They borrowed that, the Nazis borrowed that from that period. The play, The Merchant of Venice, all of that is part of that mentality of these Jews cannot be trusted, but we're gonna got to go to them for help. Yeah, Shylock is a moneylender. All right, so the Industrial Revolution brings huge changes. The scientific, all these. So these are all revolutions, right? The ironic thing is most of us Americans don't know much about the French Revolution, but it's even bigger in the sense of what it did than the American Revolution. So what happens? Features, transition, breakup, and breakout of traditional communities. Nationalism, the birth of, this is a little later, the birth of radical movements, socialism, communism. Even nationalism itself was radical. Persecution at a scale that had never been seen before. And that it sort of sets the stage for the next, the Holocaust and so on. Okay, so in the 1840s and 1880s, overall general things, there's unrest in Russia, and in Germany. Wasn't there a revolution in Germany that they attempted? 1849, but didn't, yeah,
So the Kaiser.
48, yeah.
So the Kaiser abdicated, which caused the government kind of to either, one, they accepted.
Right.
We could collapse and we fall to a socialist revolution, or we become a government under social.
Right. Which brought some Jews to America too. That was when Levi Strauss moved here. They get away from all that. So, yeah, please.
I don't mean to correct you, but I believe
Correct.
what you're talking about is 1919. I believe what.
Oh,
Ed
that.
was 1848.
Oh, the 1848 revolution, yes. I should even mention, again, I'm being glib and not dirty. What's the word when you're doing it quick like this? Summary, helicopter ride, is that I've glossed over the fact that states didn't exist even until 1800s.
Well, I
The
mean, it depends
Bismarck,
on the ones. I mean,
the one each, the unification, the idea that
England is France or even Spain all the way back in the medieval era.
Yeah.
Germany is like 1871.
right. So the idea of someone being centralized. Okay, so here's a few things that we see. The Christian Puritans begin immigrating to the United States. This is the Shabtai Tzvi episode. That's not correct. I don't know where I got that date from. It's earlier 1648, 1666 was when he declared himself the Messiah. But why is that so traumatic? Again, this idea that here all these poor Jews are in Poland and they're heard, the Messiah's come, go up on your balcony, on your roof, and it will be whisked away by angels. And then boom, nothing happens. And it's a horrible experience. There's a book I recommend, for a novel called Satan and Gorey by Isaac Bashevis Singer. It's just like whole cities were like torn apart because people were hoping and then nothing. And then, so the hope for the Messiah that was a false Messiah. Some people think that, and this is where I think Jacob Katz would agree, that Spinoza himself was a precursor for the modern period, because he's the first guy who says maybe God didn't write this thing. And of course, what did they do in Amsterdam? They didn't burn him at the stake. Please, we didn't burn people. No, they put him in cherem. Cherem was a Jewish form of excommunication, but it was social ostracization. It was not, you're never going to go to heaven like the Catholics would do, but people would not let you come into the synagogue. Anyway, some of you know that the Jews had been exiled from England. Cromwell let them come back. All right, so these are just some things. Now, the Hasidic movement is also a huge change, like I said, because suddenly you have differences. I'm doing this, you're doing that. It's just like I'm reform, you're conservative. Oh, there goes Moshe down the street. Well, why is he shunning us? Oh, because he's going to the Hasidic shul, you know. Some of you know a little bit about American history. The first Jews who come to America are Sephardic Jews from Spain. Yeah. And they settle in New Amsterdam, now New York, but also Rhode Island. Yeah. And Stuyvesant is rabidly anti-Semitic. He says, we don't want them. And then I think we talked about this last week, something about, no, it was in I don't remember what class I talked about it. Washington.
Talk about it.
In this class, Washington issued an edict letter to the Jews saying, we will not discriminate. But there were like a handful. So here's the stuff. And then we'll get to when the French Revolution happens, with its mottos, did anybody have to read The Tale of Two Cities in school? You all probably forgot it. I don't want to read that. Anyway, so I don't know if I got the right order. Égalité, liberté, égalité, fraternité. Yeah, liberty, brotherhood, and equality, or something along those lines, except for the Jews. What are we going to do with these people? So so Napoleon, there's two Napoleons, or maybe there's three even, I don't remember now, but there was an exporting of the French Revolution to Germany as well. This whole idea of, equality and freedom, whether it's real or not, grew to the point where they said, now what the hell are we going to do with these people? Because they're already here. And they were not citizens of these countries. So Napoleon, very, very, very chutzpah of the 10th degree. Does anybody remember what the Sanhedrin was in Roman times?
Basically, it was kind of like the Knesset is like today, but it was like a gathering.
Just rabbis.
Rabbis and intellectuals who were like the central part of the community.
The court made well, at least they would meet, and whether they did it a lot or little time, they met, and there were all the rabbis that we've mentioned from the Roman period were part of that. So Sanhedrin, it's a Greek word, by the way, meant court. So what Napoleon said was, I'm going to convene a Sanhedrin, and he called it the Grand Sanhedrin of 100 rabbis of France. And he asked them for, 100 questions, basically, do you consider yourselves to be part of the French people? Or, as I read in your books, don't you have loyalty to some far off place when the Messiah comes? All these things. So are you basically questioning their patriotism? And you know what they answered, more or less? We are French. We are Frenchmen of the Mosaic persuasion, sir. And they disavowed and denatured, in the sense that coming out, they denatured everything that. When today we talk, I'm not stating opinion. I'm just saying you've heard people say, not just Hatikva, which is Israel's national anthem, but the whole idea of the prayers in Judaism say that we will go back to our land someday, which is part of the whole tradition. So they didn't change the laws, but they simply said, no, that's just sentimental. And when that happened, they were given the citizenship, but there was a motto for the French Enlightenment, and this is really key. To the Jews as individuals, everything. To the Jews as a people, nothing. It wasn't quite like that. I don't speak French. But in other words, you want to go and live here, you want to have this job, you can do this, you can do this. You're a good Jew, you're a good Jew, you're a good Jew. But as a people, we're not going to call you a corporation anymore. And it's kind of like, and this is all very it's kind of like the way early emancipation worked. I'm not talking about the Jim Crow South, but in America, in the North. And so you had good blacks, nice Negroes, forgive me, Clarence, you know, that, well, yeah, so, but the idea is that this is a man who's civilized, who was, well, Frederick Douglass would be a good example. When I was a kid, we all studied George Washington Carver, who was a great scientist. Then we had Dr. King. Well, Dr. King was trying to make changes, but there was, you know, the good blacks and the bad blacks and the militants. So you had the good Jews. So the best example of that we're going to see in a minute was Moses Mendelssohn from Berlin. And he is held up by this German society as a man of culture. All right, so let's just go up a couple of things. American Civil War. Well, I'm going ahead of myself, but in the beginnings of the reform movement, and I'll try to do this as quickly as I can. Again, I'm being cute and humorous. 1820s, 30s, 40s, you begin to see a rising middle class of Jews in Germany, particularly. In France, it's another story, but I know Germany better. And they begin to look around for the first time. And the ghetto walls have been broken down. And they look around and say, hey, look, I mean, they had seen the churches, but they hear from their Gentile neighbors, they have a sermon in German. They get to sit with their wives. They get to have beautiful music. Look at that beautiful spire. Look at our synagogue. It looks like, you know, and why are we speaking this garbled German? Why don't we speak German? Not quite, you know, that quickly. So little by little, these people who, and the word I said was Haskalah. Let's say it together, Haskalah. That's a verb that becomes a noun. An individual is called a maskil. So enlightener. I'll tell you a funny one. So there's two Jews sitting on a train in 1830, let's say, and they're both wearing hats. All right. And they're talking like this. And this is a joke, completely not true, but like you and I talking and say, I was telling my wife, I was telling my wife, Rivka, that we should send our daughter, Hannah, to Cheder so she could be a good Jew. You know, they take off their hats to talk about general things, but they put their yarmulke back on or their hat back on if it's anything Jewish. So the motto of that time began to be a Jew in your home, but be a mensch in the street. Does that sound cute? Especially for you, right? You can wear your yarmulke as long as it's under your helmet. So that was the beginnings of what they didn't call it the reform movement, they call it reformers. So little small changes, like I said, let's have in Germany, in the first Reform synagogue, as I remember, was established in 1824 in not Berlin. I don't have it. No, I don't have it in another document. Anyway, that was all it was. They were called reformers. And they would say, you know, our service will be shorter. Our service will be with German and Yiddish mixed in, and maybe a little bit of more music. Little small changes, very cosmetic. It's not until the 1860s that you see a huge change and a break where people would say, again, like the Hasidic, you know, so I said that the Hasidic started this idea that we have this temple and that temple. You would go to your shul, I go to my shul. So then they said, oh, I'm going to the Reform synagogue. And so later, now the reason I did that was because of America. When these people began to move to America, wow. Yeah. So have any of you heard of the movement in America to change the Shabbat to be Sundays?
That and then it was combined with maybe poetry or not.
Okay. 18, this is this date here, 1885. Oh, it's working there. 1885. Well, actually, I should go back to here. 1873, the Reform movement establishes, they now call it URJ, Union Reform Council. There's a little bit on movements tonight too. Union Reform Congregations. So then they called it Hebrew congregations. They changed that name about 10 years ago. So there's rabbis that are being, you know, asked to come to these congregations in Charlottesville and in Florida, in New York. and then finally San Francisco. By the way, the movie Frisco Kid with Gene Wilder, he's going to a synagogue in San Francisco. It's not an Orthodox synagogue, but it's also not a Reformed synagogue. But there begins to be a small demand. So they started a seminary in Cincinnati, and at that seminary, they graduated the first class of rabbinical students in 1885. And what do you think they served at the graduation party? They hired a great caterer. Like, not pork. They didn't serve pork, but they served non-kosher meat and shrimp. And so when this hit the Jewish press in America, they called it the Treifa banquet. So Reform movement did not have the greatest, reputation, but there begins to be a change. Going back to Russia, and even though most people think about 1900, 1919, 1920, there were huge pogroms all over Russia in 1881. You mentioned this.
Isn't that Alexander
Alexander the Third.
I can't remember the exact numbers,
Yeah.
but it's one of them.
Alexander the First was Alexander, Nicholas. They were all worse and the worst and the worst. But then there was one czar that was a little bit the first. All right, second, and then there was an attempt on the life of Alexander the Third, and it was pinned on the Jews. And so, again, pogroms were not just something that happened. Yes, they had earlier traditions of it's Easter, the Jews killed Christ, and they're all getting drunk and they're going out. That was small. I mean, it happened. This was organized by the government. And so this is before Fiddler on the Roof. The Fiddler on the Roof period is really the 1905 in that period. But so this was the beginning of the first migration of two groups of Jews. The larger group obviously came to America, not large, but the beginning of the immigration, and a very small group of Jews began to think about Israel. All right. So the guy who's usually credited with the Zionist idea is Theodor Herzl, who's here. And you all have heard the story, perhaps maybe we'll show it. I got to stop talking so we can show the movie. So Herzl is covering the Dreyfus trial in Paris. All right, quick. Dreyfus was whom? Alfred Dreyfus. Huh?
French officer.
French Jewish officer who was accused of giving away secrets to the Germans. It was a Franco-German war, and poor Herzl is a very highly assimilated Viennese Jew. Already, that's already changed. There's already by the 1880s. When was the Dreyfus case? It was 1894, I believe. But anyway, so he's a journalist and he's covering this, and he goes to this thing and he sees, French people yelling, "Kill the Jew, kill the Jew." And Dreyfus is stripped of his medals in the courtyard and he's sent to Devil's Island. Eventually he is rescued. Actually, it's a good movie. Don't remember the name of it, but it's all about Emile Zola, who was not a Jew, but Emile Zola wrote novels at the time, and he had a famous, it's like Mumia Abu Jamal. People, who he is? Anybody know? He's a black.
Remember the movie, but it kind of showed how this case went from something that
Well,
was small.
the idea that somebody was speaking out for this. So Zola wrote an essay called J'accuse, and that's what Meirav was saying on Sunday. J'accuse, I accuse. So he basically blew the whistle on the anti-Semitism of the French army, and but it took years to get him. And by the time he was released, he was a broken man. So that's what stimulated Herzl to write The Jewish State. So I'm going backwards. Herzl is credited today as being the founder of modern Zionism. The truth is that, and I learned this later on, this guy, Leo Pinsker, in 1882, who was a Russian Jew, wrote a book that, so he's, I don't want to, draw comparisons to Black history, but, he's Eldridge Cleaver. Nobody knew him, but he wrote his own book called Auto-Emancipation. And he suggested at that point, hey, folks, maybe we should go back to Israel. And that sparked the first movement of a modern movement of Jews coming to Israel. All right, so let's finish this slide and let's show the film. Guys, got any quick questions? Am I boring you or am I stimulating you? I'm only showing this because, I'm showing this, I'm only doing this because basically, when did Hasidism come about? 1820s in Russia. When did the Reform movement start? 1820s, 30s, 40s in Germany. When did Zionism start? 1880s, 1860s. So when did Jews, like, again, thinking of Fiddler on the Roof, remember there's 5 daughters. One runs off with a Russian Russian peasant, basically. One runs off with Paul Michael Glazer's character, Perchik, I think is his name, who's a Jewish revolutionary, communist, and so basically that's the beginning of the breakup. So even though we all think in America of French Enlightenment, French Revolution, American Revolution, it was great because it liberated people. But what did it do to the Jews? It began to break up the traditional society. Am I scaring you? No, I don't want to go back to before the Enlightenment. I'd rather be where we are. Let's see if I can get my, so I mentioned, where is, I have it saved. Just the question is where I put it. Here it is. Okay. So I don't know how many of you guys read this stuff, watch this stuff, but here we go. I will share the screen.
Persecution scattered the Jews all around the world. It's a story of splendor and suffering that leaves.
Okay, hang on a second. This is just the it's just the intro. So
It's right up to the present day.
When films become available on video on YouTube, it's just amazing because you don't have to worry about where getting it showing it in class. I could show this in class. We have it. Okay, screen share. So snippets, if I can get it working. Screen share. Oh, there it is.
They've left their mark as great thinkers, scientists, and artists. How did the Jews manage to maintain their identity over all these years?
Barbara. Okay. No, we're not.
The Jews, History of a People.
Geschichte eine Volk.
Part 5, Zion.
Frankfurt. So this is
A man on the way.
because he does look like
Moses
Moses
Mendelssohn,
Mendelssohn.
philosopher and Jew. He has studied the history of his people and wants to change its future. Mendelssohn is invited to Sanssouci, a Jew in the palace of the Prussian king Frederick the Great. What do you deal in, Jew?
Hang on just a second.
Something you don't have. Reason.
Volume. Oh, it's as loud as you hear it well?
Moses Mendelssohn has made a name for himself as a philosopher of the Enlightenment and a worldly thinker.
Oh,
People are reading his writings not only in Germany, but in the whole of Europe. It is thanks to this reputation that he was invited to Sanssouci.
you're looking at my computer. Okay, how do I get that? Yeah.
The Saxon Minister of State, Baron von Fritsch, admires him. He has come to Potsdam to debate with this famous Jew.
There we go. Now I'm not.
Mendelssohn uses the interest taken by the statesman to state his political demands. Religious tolerance must be granted to everyone equally, including Jews and Muslims. Let us be human beings amongst human beings. We are entitled to the same rights and duties that any other citizen is
There,
entitled to.
that's for them.
Baron von Fritsch sees in him the living proof for the fundamental idea of the Enlightenment. All human beings are able to liberate themselves from the shackles of their social circumstances. The meeting takes place right next door to the Prussian king, but he won't receive Jews. The king refuses to admit him into his Academy of Sciences, even though Prussia's greatest thinkers have unanimously voted him into their midst. This
That's
recognition
the
is
real
denied
picture.
him because he is a Jew.
Huh? I know. What do you want? He was a handsome guy for his time.
Ambition
By the way, another thing about Mendelssohn, it's in the article. I sent you guys an article just on Mendelssohn. He was not the first, but this is another side point. Last names. You got a last name because of your city or your occupation, or if somebody, there's a certain, the partition period, they said, okay, you're dark, you're going to be called Schwarz. You're white, you're going to be called Weiss. You're from the mountain, we're going to call you Berg. That was what they did. The Germans with naming all these Russians and Polish Jews that they inherited. But the idea, you were generally known as Moshe ben Mendel. So his name was Moshe ben Mendel from such and such, from Dessau. That was the city he was born in. So he took the name Mendelssohn instead of Mendel from Dessau, which is a big step. So because he wanted to honor his father. And he was a whole story about his father was a
and thirsty for knowledge, Mendelssohn had left his parents' home
supposed to be. Oh, stop. I mean, keep going.
in Dessau when he was only 14, so that he could follow his teacher to the Prussian, so that I may fight for the
Oops.
complete
I see what
equality of
happened.
my
Sorry.
fellow knight
Sorry.
him, because he is a Jew.
I hit the screen.
His teacher, a so-called protected Jew. With protection letters, Jews were able to buy themselves a limited right of residence and trade in Prussia, in return for a royal fee of 1,000 thalers, a fortune.
Prussia, wasn't called Germany at the time. Yeah. Now what happened?
At that time, 100,000 people lived in Berlin, and amongst them there were just 2,000 Jews. Even those who had managed to establish themselves here could still be banished at any time. In his kingdom, so said the Prussian king, everyone should find salvation in their own way. The exception, the Jewish citizens. Tolerance and fairness weren't for everyone. Most Jews withdrew and lived isolated from the Christian surroundings. They read in Hebrew and spoke Yiddish. Their right to trade is restricted. They're excluded from many professions. Those who are lucky find work in manufacturing businesses founded by a small group of wealthy Jews. Moses Mendelssohn also earns his family's living in a Jewish silk factory. As a bookkeeper, he balances the bills and checks the goods.
So
He called this a tedious
I'll
business
just
that used up the
stop for
best
just a
years of his
second.
life.
stop for just a second. Okay, stop share. I'll just keep talking over it. And one of the other things about Mendelssohn, which they're going to get
Because he
to, but
has
I'm gonna
other
skip
plans.
ahead.
As a follower of the Enlightenment, he wants to fight against the oppression
okay,
of his
here he is.
fellow believers. But that is only possible if they open up and adapt to the society around them.
So in his spare time, he begins translating the Bible into German.
Mendelssohn's ideas meet with great approval amongst many Jews. Mementos of him are still cherished today, like his protective goggles in the Jewish Museum in Berlin. At night, Mendelssohn works like mad on his own writings on religion and philosophy. He also acquires the secular knowledge rejected by the rabbis, besides lacking in two worlds.
So we're going to pause
For the Jewish
and just, so all we can do is like little vignettes of people. You may remember one of the earlier versions of this film, it was volume 2, had an imaginary person playing the role of Judah Maccabee. And, daddy's saying, don't look at the Greeks, don't do this, don't do that, so as I said, these actors, so there are lots of people like Mendelssohn, but there's nobody quite, as an example. There was a guy named Lessing who became his close friend, Christian, and it was, like I said, this idea of you're a good Jew, we like you, and we will promote these kinds of Jews, but not those kind of Jews. So again, this whole idea of, in order to be accepted, just don't be so different. Now, Mendelssohn kept kosher. He was completely Orthodox, but he made it possible. I would see what happens. Made it possible. And when I was a kid, in a Reform synagogue, I remember one of our history books had you have a cartoon. It was an eighth grade level book, but it was a picture of Mendelssohn, just like that comic with his face with a big nose, breaking the walls of the ghetto. Like it was him. He is Superman. But the truth is not so far off from that. But by translating the Hebrew Bible directly into German, what were his goals? Twofold. If they see our Bible in our translation, not in theirs, they will realize we're not barbarians. Right? Secondly, those darn Jews are going to stop reading that old gibberish Yiddish and start reading good German. So he wrote the translation in Yiddish letters originally. Okay, let's see if we can go ahead a little bit. And that's, and then I should, there's another article I didn't show you that talks about the role of women in the Haskalah. But I sent it, so I'm not going to read it right now. So Moses and his daughter was Fanny, and Fanny had several children. One of her children was Felix Mendelssohn, the composer. So 2 generations. Felix Mendelssohn was baptized. Who decided to baptize Felix? His mother. So, but Fanny Mendelssohn and a number of other women, and this is like, again, we're just using our imaginations now. What do women do? Today might be different. We're already kind of past that, but I remember in the day that women would have consciousness raising groups, right? And my mother didn't go to like a feminist thing, but my mother got us involved with going to Boyle Heights to interact with Latino men, Hispanic men who had gotten out of prison and were going through, recovery. It was basically a house or a group. And so that like women were very active in the Haskalah period in changing, because they knew that if they changed the society, that society would be better for them. So a not wealthy, but a well-off Jewish woman would have a thing in her house called a salon. And the salons played a very important role in, again, this enlightenment process, because who would they bring as a speaker? They would bring a Jewish enlightened teacher, or they might bring a local history professor, Jewish or non-Jewish. So all these women, the men are off working, and the men are doing whatever they do, and the women are changing the society. It's a very important role. Okay, let's see if I can get another slide here. This one, yeah, there's a lot of German folks talking in this. Let's see, what is that? I had it.
Worship that used to be here, but little of this has survived National Socialism and communism.
Oh, I'm talking about a German sound. The next thing up is going to be the Hasidic movements.
The Jews of Chernivtsi meet every morning for their service.
This is
Many that pray here have only managed to survive through happy coincidences.
Poland. This is contemporary. A few years ago.
Conditions for Jews. At the end of the 18th century, the Tsar conquered large parts of Poland. That was where the majority of the Eastern European Jews were living. But the Tsar did not want them in his heartland, so he forbade the Jews to leave their living areas.
This is the Pale. What I do? Oh. Yeah, yeah,
Here, the author Mary Antin grew up towards the end of the 19th century before she emigrated to the United States with her family. In her books, she wrote about the everyday lives of Jews in the Tsarist Empire. I was a prisoner. The shackles had grown familiar to my flesh.
Where's the Pacific thing?
Even as a young girl, she entrusted her diary with her experiences, fears, and hopes. Mary Antin's hometown of Polotsk lies in modern-day Lithuania. Jews were living amongst themselves here without rights, oppressed and often persecuted by their Christian neighbors. Time and again, her parents warned Mary and her sisters to beware of the Christians. Christian holidays were particularly dangerous for Jews, Mary remembered.
Remember, this is, I mean, I didn't give you a good transition. West is at least changing. East is not. You go further east you go, the more you hit me with it, right? The further east you go, the more not just conservative, but retrenched, reactionary it goes. I mean, just think about the fact that the Russian Revolution, there were two. There was 1905 and then 1917, and it was like, no, we won't let go of power. And so the czars were eventually, taken out. So it's not that they're more ignorant; they just did not want to change.
Passover was a time of horror for the Jews. Somebody would start up that lie about murdering Christian children, and the stupid peasants would get mad about it and fill themselves with vodka and set out to kill the Jews. They attacked them with knives and axes, killed them or tortured them, and burned their houses. Again and again, there were gruesome pogroms in the Tsarist Empire. This label for the anti-Jewish riots originated in Russia.
That's, by the way, that's Kishinev.
The Gentiles were going to tear me in pieces with axes and knives and ropes. They were going to burn me alive. The cross, what would they do to me first? The Tsar was the head of the Russian Orthodox Church. As protector of the true Christian faith, he was openly hostile towards Judaism. For the solution of the Jewish question, a rule of thumb was proposed. A third of Jews should convert, another third should emigrate, and the final third should starve.
Well, you have to remember that by this
Taylor's-
time,
But despite the poverty,
more Jews were living in Russia or Poland than in the West anyway. So this is the vast amount of what later, people think of as moving to America. All right, let me see if I can get forward to. Yeah, here's the Hasidic movement begins a little bit earlier, but here's the beginning. Here's a piece of that. Now, some of you know that
for 300 rubles, the parents could ransom the little recruits. A fortune.
И самый последний способ,
Some families pawned their livestock or even their home and farm. Parents
Talking about right there.
you speak Russian?
No,
Oh.
so no, I know what they're
Which-
talking about, the 300 rubles.
Yeah, you
So-
could be drafted into the, go ahead.
So for every child, I guess you had, if you had a male, they were supposed to go to the army. They become part of the Tsar's personal army,
For 25 years.
if not a lifetime.
Yeah.
And if you go around Russia today, you'll find these little makeshift huts. Those were jewels that the soldiers basically
Mhm.
built themselves because their parents taught them so much stuff when they were kids. By the time they left, they were basically almost lay leaders for our time, I guess.
Oh, I was going to say the opposite. I mean, you're right. They did continue, but the goal was to make them assimilate, force them. All right. So a little bit on the Hasidic experience.
The Tsarist Empire experienced oppression and suffering right from their childhood. Only their faith provided support and comfort. In moments when their wretchedness was greatest, it wakened new strength. Through the longing for closeness to God, a new religious movement gained more and more followers. Hasidism.
At least he didn't say
Soon
Chassidism.
there were men with long beards, kaftans, and fur hats in every shtetl. They called themselves the pious, the Hebrew word for which is Chassidut.
Oh, he did.
Medjugorje in the
Chassidut.
Ukraine is an important place of pilgrimage for Hasidic Jews to this day.
This is Medjugorje.
Here, the founder of the movement,
Birthplace of the
Baal
Baal
Shem
Shem
Tov,
Tov.
lies buried. His message was simple and convincing.
The only way to give themselves a self-image of self-esteem is to show them that however small they are, with emotion and with love and with happiness, they can be Jews bigger than anybody else.
What?
By the way, this is a side note. Do you know why the Hasidim dress the way they do? Why? I mean, that particular group
The hats from like Poland and the rest of.
to be that was what noblemen wore back in the 17th century or 16th century. So we're going to dress the way we believe, to be noble. So it's kind of an interesting sidelight. And we could do a whole study on the Hasidic movements. Yeah. Now he's talking, he says here, this is my son.
Grandson from London. And you see, they both go with their, what we call their armor. They go and they show themselves, we are different from the general population. We want to keep ourselves separate. We are nice people. We interface with everybody politely, but nevertheless, distance. Because we want to keep our uniqueness where we are.
These days, New York is a center of the Hasidim. They maintain the tradition of their ancestors. Many are the descendants of Jewish immigrants from Russia.
I'd like to do a thing on America, but I'm going to skip to Herzl and
The
Israel.
closed world of the shtetl was breaking up. Some searched for support in their inner faith, others decided to flee from poverty and oppression. Like Mary Antin and her family, they wanted to risk a new beginning. Shipping agencies began advertising a new promised land across the Great Ocean, America. The father, Israel Antin, made the move there in order to build up a new existence for his family. Only then did he want to bring his family over.
Hamburg nach Boston.
Mary had been waiting for this time for 3 years.
Right, I'd love to talk about Mary, but he just really, he loves to, this particular series loves to zero in on people who wrote diaries and women, which is fine. I'm not, but
Just like the Antin family, 2 million Russian Jews left towards the end of the 19th century. They were part of a great wave of emigration, and they all had the same destination.
what is
America.
this place in New York? Ellis Island. There you go. The Statue of Liberty. Yeah.
The Statue of Liberty stood at the turning point between the nightmares of the past and the hope.
A joke. A guy comes and he says, what is your name? And he says, Shane Ferguson. I just forgot. I don't know what Shane Ferguson. Okay, you're Shane Ferguson. So things like that. So this is the great period of the immigration from they usually say 1881, but really the biggest waves were after World War I, but just before and after, like 1914, 1916, and then after World War I. Do you know what happened? 1921.
Immigration reform in the United States.
No more. Yeah, we don't want those wops and kinks and chinks and kikes anymore. We don't want any of these, actually they did allow Western Europeans in. They just didn't want Jews and the others, yeah. Yeah. I want to see if I have the Herzl thing. And we'll close there. Here we go. Okay. Meanwhile,
During the 19th century, Jerusalem was under the rule of the Ottoman Turks. After Mount Zion, synonymous with the city and the country, the Jewish settlers called themselves Zionists.
now it's not quite
Many of them were
chronological because
intellectuals.
the
They
footage-
wanted to realize the new
there were
human in the
people
promised land,
that had moved
so they
there
said.
in
Instead
the
of studying the
1880s.
Bible, they rolled up their sleeves, dried out marshes, and planted trees. For a long time, they hadn't been allowed to work on the fields. Spades and hoes now became the embodiment of a self-determined life.
The motto, not motto, but the watchword of the Zionist
This man
movement is
made a political program out of their vision.
was we were never allowed to own land in Russia or Poland or et cetera, et cetera. So this is a big liberation. And there was a guy named who am I thinking of? Ber Borochov was a Russian. These guys they were intellectuals. And they said, I'm going to go take a pickaxe and I'm going to work the land. Okay, so here's Herzl. And if you look at him, you see how handsome he was. People thought of him like King David.
And a uniform movement out of different groups. This man was Theodor Herzl.
Herzl. And now
His
they're gonna-
parents were assimilated Jews from Budapest. Religion played next to no role. Theodor Herzl was working as a correspondent for the Wiener Freie Presse in Paris. France fascinated him, the country in which the Jews had enjoyed legal equality since the French Revolution. Many held important positions in the government and economy, but still there were deep-rooted prejudices against Jews in society. The drama in the military academy in Paris opened Herzl's eyes. In 1894, the Jewish officer Alfred Dreyfus was accused of alleged espionage for Germany. A military tribunal sentenced
See the
him to
magazine?
lifelong
They're
banishment
breaking the
without
sword.
having sound proof. He was publicly cashiered. Again and again, Dreyfus swore his innocence. Many weren't interested in that. He was a Jew and therefore guilty. Even the serious press wrote, "Death to the Jew, death to the Judas." The trial split the country. Theodor Herzl observed the
You're
affair.
terrible.
Anti-Semitic outbreaks in an enlightened country, in the top levels of society in Europe on the brink of a new century.
Outcast
This was
out
the
of the
crucial
military.
experience for
And he
him.
wasn't just, what's the word? Kicked out, he was imprisoned. Yeah, so,
In his newspaper articles, he pointed out the inconsistencies.
hang on,
He was
say again? He got
pardoned eventually.
He got pardoned much, much later. It was-
But he eventually was called back for World War I and he served till.
I didn't know that.
He-
I did not
he
know
did
that.
return back.
convinced
Okay.
of the innocence of the Jewish officer. With this opinion, he was in the minority.
Oh, this is Zola. All right, so I think it was all we have time for.
Culture. What
If I
good
have-
did it do us?
Here's
In the eyes of the people, we remain Jews. And that doesn't just mean believers in the Jewish faith, but also sons of a different tribe.
And today, if you were to read the Judenstaat, the Jewish state, that's what it means. It's a little bit, and it's a great, it's not a great novel because he's not a novelist, but he writes about, without having been there, he writes about the Holy Land and these lovely people who have welcomed us to their land. And let's go talk to Mahmoud. I didn't read the book, but I'm saying, that's the naivete of believing that this land, they used to have a motto in the Zionist movement very early on, and they kept it for a long time. They said, a land without a people for a people without a land. Well, they didn't realize there were people living there. Now, not a lot. They did not call themselves Palestinians. They were Arab landowners that had vast tracts of land, and they would, have people living there. I think we should end here. So you get the lights and watch the film, the rest of the film on your own. And there's more in this section. And then this part 5 leads up to the beginnings of the Nazi thing. What I didn't cover, and I really shouldn't, but I want to just touch on it. Do you all know where the term anti-Semitism was coined? Came from not Jew hatred, but the word antisemit, whatever it would be in German. In the 1880s, there was a guy named Wilhelm Marr, not Bill Maher. Bill Maher is actually his Jewish mother. But Maher was not the first one, M-A-H-R. And they coined this term, this idea, the same period of time that the Jim Crow movement is growing in this country. And basically, if we got to deal with these people being part of society, then let's restrict them. So Jews are, once emancipation takes place, they are getting jobs, they're getting professions, they're going to school, they're becoming lawyers. Oh my God, they're becoming equal. And so the movement of anti-Semitism was, there is something racially and what's the word I'm thinking of when you say a personality, compositionally, they're just constitutionally. It's not that we hate them because they didn't accept Jesus. It's not that we hate them because they have they should have the profession. They just are evil people. It's not religious. So that's what I've talked about this in class before. Political anti-Semitism and economic anti-Semitism begins in this period. And that's what is really quite spooky when you think about it, because it was that seed that was planted that then becomes part of the Nazi philosophy in the 30s. And it's so frightening when you think about it. All right, guys. So wow. Are we doing the Holocaust in Israel next week?
Yeah.
Oh boy. So it's hard, but it's well, I'll send you some more videos. There's no way we're going to be able to do justice to either of those topics. Let's see, what other announcements are important? Oh, this Friday. Yeah, this Friday. It's not, they just say rabbi's doing. This Friday night, I'm going to be talking about, I think it would be very chutzpah for me to talk about Black History Month, but I'm going to talk about well-known, important Black Jews in American society. So you'll be, huh? Oh, you won't be able to be there. We can. Oh, that's right. Okay. Yeah. No, but anyway, if you want to come and then the next couple, and then Purim is coming. It should be a lot of fun. And I didn't have a chance to officially tell everybody your new position. Do you always know, y'all know? Who you
did last week.
I did? Okay, she's now my boss. Okay, no, okay,
No, I'm not gonna try that.
okay. Oh, Mary, you got to give your talk next week, right? Where's Josh go? Josh, what is Mary's talk on? Jewish women's? Yeah, perfect. It'll, I don't, he doesn't know. Okay,
Geez, everybody bug me, the info thing and sign up for the Hebrew class.
yeah, okay, that's what I'm asking, No, not Noam, but excuse me, Matani to come. We got 2 more weeks. Is that it? This week? Next week is somehow we'll fit Holocaust in Israel. The last week will be what next? Not just what next for you, but and I'm going to recommend that you all see the movie we have here, and it's also, I'll send you the links, called The Jewish Americans. It's cute, it's fun, it has 4 or 5, like PBS, and you get to see what the Lower East Side was like, the Yiddish theater of the 20s, and none of you were old enough. I didn't really grow up with the black and white TVs. You know that all the
We didn't even have TV first,
Y-
then they had.
Yeah.
TV came out, and then they had these little screens.
Little screens, right. Yeah.
Put on the TV, you click on.
Right. So, the screenwriters, writers for Sid Caesar's Your Show of Shows, which was an early 50s comedy show. And but Sid Caesar was the star, and the Imogene Coca, who's Italian, and all the writers were Neil Simon, Woody Allen, Mel Brooks, all these guys who later on went on to become movie guys. So there's a lot of funny, interesting stuff about the 50s. And then there's a segment in this about the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. So it's worth seeing. All right. Parting shots?
Don't go, I need to talk to you,
Okay, I'm here.
not you.
Me?
Oh, sure. Okay.
I didn't do it.
Okay, yeah. And Jamie. So Jamie's on next week, on your talk. And who did I just say?
Mary.
And Mary from
But you need the
in
projector
person.
next week, right?
Well, we're gonna keep this thing. I now that I got this, I'm not giving this up because this thing. Oh, you're gonna go home and be mommy so she can come here.
No, how about you do that?
her.
Do that. Yeah. Besides, most of these people don't know her as well as they know you. All right, good day to everybody online. I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Keep coming
Um,
back. What?
Hey, Rabbi, I have a question real quick.
Yes. We don't have to only talk here. You can also contact me outside. Go ahead.
Okay, so I still need to pay the other $200 for the course, but I probably won't be able to do that until March. I need to wait until I get
No
my
problem.
tax returns. Is that okay?
No
'Cause
problem. I'm not,
okay, thank you.
of course.
That's
Yeah, money's just been
Don't-
really tight, so
don't-
I haven't been able to pay off.
Don't let that stop you. Everybody,
Okay.
if you want to learn Hebrew in any form, just keep the schedule. March 5th, the week after this class is over, Matani's going to be starting a Hebrew class. I'll probably come for a few sessions and it should be really worthwhile. And it's cheaper than me. What is the charge for the class?
I think it's 150.
200?
150, I
Oh,
think.
Oh, 300 for non-members.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay.
Um,
I told my force,